Hey everybody, Hunter back again from Showtime Studios. Just a video has to do with the basics. I've been asked this question several times, and in fact, I just had it asked again this evening on how to find mold lines and how to get rid of them. So this is like I say, for you guys that are seasoned veterans out there, you know how to look up. Mold lines, how to find them, pretty much know exactly where different manufacturers put them. But for the guys that are newer to the hobby or have never addressed those kind of issues, that's what this video is for. So to start off with, when we speak of a mold line, what we're talking about, if you take your regular parts tree, this happens to be out of the Oldsmobile kit that we're going to be doing the Pro Street tutorial on. And you look at the parts tree itself, you will notice on the sides of it, you will have a sharp line, and it will be on the inside and the outside. Now, what that sharp line is when this goes into a mold, there's a lower half of the mold, and then there's an upper half of the mold. And those two pieces will come together, and then there's cavities. Wherever you see the parts tree and the parts, there's a cavity in that mold. And when those two come together, they inject the styrene into those cavities, and that's what creates the part. But wherever the mold comes together is what the mold line is. And one way to find out if your parts have mold lines and you're not real familiar with it is to look at the parts tree. And any part that, like in this case here, we have some parts like the water pump that's on here. The water pump is pretty much on the upper half of your round parts tree. So basically, the way you're going to look at it is you're going to take this parts tree, you're going to split it in half. What they'll do is they'll run the mold line right around the mounting edge of the water pump on this. And here on the distributor, it's the same thing. It pretty much goes right around the bottom edge of the distributor. What else do we have on here? The carburetor's on here, the same thing. The starter now drops below the line. So not all of the part is on the upper side. Half of it's on the upper side, half of it's on the lower side. So in that case, you're going to have a mold line going right through the center of it. And that's what you want to get rid of. And like I say, if you look at your parts tree, you can pretty much find the mold lines on the parts tree and follow them off the connection point right to the part. And you'll know that that's a mold line and it needs to come off. Now, in the case of the exhaust here, the same thing. Half of the exhaust is on the top side of the parts tree, half of it's on the bottom. So you're going to have a mold line that runs pretty much the entire length of this exhaust. So that's how to find it on your parts tree. Like I say, the seasoned guys already know that, but I'm just getting information out there for guys that want to start addressing, mold lines and things like that, which I highly recommend. That's all basics, and that's what makes a good model is learning the basics and addressing all those. So, like I say, on the parts trees, that's the best way to find them. Now we'll move on to a couple different bodies I have here. We'll start with the Olds body that's in that Olds kit that parts tree came out of. And what you're looking for on the body is a sharp edge, a sharp line. And normally, like on your Revell stuff, they are going to run the mold line on the body is going to come back somewhere on this edge of the fender. Sometimes it'll sit up on top of the fender, but most of the time it's on the very edge of it. And I can feel it with my finger on this one. It is on the very edge. It will come back. It comes right up the roof rail trim and all the way back. And if you look closely, right between the trim and the quarter window on the B pillar, you will see that line go across there. And that's what you're looking for. You're trying to find that line and make sure that you get rid of that. And then that line will come on back and it comes down the quarter panel right on that edge and down the outer part of the tail light right here. And, getting rid of that kind of stuff on your parts, it's a matter of going in and doing some scraping and some sanding, which all of you have heard me talk about before. On the body itself, you can use very light sandpaper to get rid of that line. There's several, there's several different ways that you can do it. I don't think there's any one way that's right. But when you're sanding and trying to get rid of that line and that sharp edge, make sure that you're not sanding down on, like this car has a lip right here on the fender. Make sure you're not sanding down onto that lip, because you'll shave down the body line and, basically screw up what you're trying to do. And just getting rid of the body or getting rid of the mold line, you're going to end up screwing up the body line. So in that case, like in this particular car here, I could take my lighter sanding stick. You can use whatever grit you want. You can use just a regular piece of sandpaper. But what I like to do on that is take that stick and line it up right against that body line. And that way I'm not affecting the body line at all. And I'm just lightly moving the stick back and forth to get rid of the sharp edge that's on the line. And I'll usually do the side of it like that, and then I will come up on top and then do the same thing on the top edge and actually radius the fender a little bit. And you got to be careful on how much you take off when you're doing the body, because you don't want to distort, the lines of the body or anything. But that's basically how you go about doing it. You don't need any real heavy grit. This is a pretty fine grit here. Sometimes you can get by with 1,000 grit. The wet and dry paper that I use a lot, that you've seen me do wet sanding videos and stuff like that with, you can do that. Now, when you get up on like this roof rail trim, be extra careful with that, because it's a very thin part anyway, and all you're trying to do is just knock that very sharp edge off of it. So I just lightly go across that trim and kind of roll the body at the same time, and just just take a little bit of that edge off, because you still want the trim to stick out so that you can bare metal foil it, or whichever technique you're using for that. But just be very careful with anything that's raised like that. Same thing back here on the quarter panel. You just want to do, you can take your sanding stick and line it up on the body line so that you don't jump over that, and just sand that down a little bit. And it doesn't take much. With the newer kits and stuff, the mold lines are, especially if it's a newer mold, your mold lines will come off pretty quick. Now, if you're messing with an older kit that has, that's been around for a while and re-released many a times, the mold lines are going to get a lot bigger and they take a little bit more work to get off. But that's how you would address them on the Revell G body, the O's. And we also have the donation kit that came into me. This is the shoebox body from Monogram. Now, in this particular case, the mold line comes right across the top of the fender here. It comes back, comes up the roof line and down, and back here on the C-pillar, you will see that line transfer across and over to the edge again, and then it comes back the quarter panel and pretty much disappears. And then on the front, you can look at it and you will see that mold line come right through there. It's just a very small line, and across the simulated bumper piece right here, and comes down the front. So you just go in, and that's where you go in with your just a piece of sandpaper and just kind of work it back and forth, knock that line out, do your primering on it. If you use primer, and sand it again, and if any of the line is still there, you'll knock the primer off and you'll be able to see it. But make sure you try to get rid of those lines before you do your paint work. Next up, we have an AMT body. This is the Chevelle body from AMT. And basically the same thing. AMT puts their mold lines in pretty much the same spot. They come right back the edge of the fender here. They come by the A-pillar, back up along the roof rail, and then they drop back onto the quarter panel here and flow right out the back. So same process as the G body that we did as far as getting rid of the mold line on it. So that's how you address those. And then this is a Oshima Lamborghini. And on these kits here, they are a lot better when it comes to mold lines. They really, sometimes it can get you in trouble, because what they do is they hide them so well and they're very faint. But if you're, going for a high quality build, even if it's box stock and you're trying to address all your basics and you paint this thing, then you will see the mold lines. And if you're going into competition, of course, that's going to, it's going to bite you because the judges will find that mold line. Now, basically on the Oshima kit, it's in the same spot. It's not as pronounced. The one thing it is pronounced on this kit is the sink marks. There's a lot of sink marks in this, but the mold lines are pretty much the least of my worries on this thing. But the mold line comes right back here, basically follows the same thing as all the other kits did, and comes right back the edge of the fender here. And like I say, you can feel the body with your thumb and feel if it's sharp. If it has a real sharp edge on it, most likely there's a mold line under there. There is another technique, and I don't know if I have my pen here. Yeah, here it is. This is something that I don't normally do on my builds, but it is another thing that you can try that I have seen a lot of builders do it this way. They will take a Sharpie with the body straight out of the bag, and they will look for the mold line on the body, and they will take a Sharpie and they'll just kind of come along and color in the body in the area where that mold line is. And then what they do is they go in and do their sanding, and when all that black Sharpie comes off, then they know they've taken out the mold line. For the most part, it works for a lot of people. For me personally, I don't like doing it that way. I like to go ahead and watch what I'm doing just on the body and sanding it down that way, and then either prime it or go right into paint, whichever, whatever the body looks like and what I'm doing at the time. But hopefully that gives some of the newer guys out there and people that want to address, mold lines and things like that, an idea on what to look for and how to address them. So if you have any questions or concerns on this video or need any more help on mold lines, leave me a message, let me know, and we'll be more than glad to help you out with that. So that's all we've got for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching and supporting Showtime Studios, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.